In the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, nestled among the rolling hills of eastern Kentucky, lay the small town of Pinewood Grove. With its quaint main street lined with mom-and-pop stores and friendly faces, it was the kind of place where everyone knew each other by name. The surrounding ancient forests were a constant presence, their lush greenery visible from every corner of town. It was in this idyllic setting that 12-year-old Alex Thompson found his true calling. Unlike most kids his age who spent their free time glued to screens or hanging out at the local diner, Alex was drawn to the wilderness that bordered his hometown. From a young age, he'd felt a deep connection to nature, as if the forest itself was calling out to him. Alex's parents, John and Sarah Thompson, had always encouraged their son's love for the outdoors. John, a park ranger at the nearby Daniel Boone National Forest, had taught Alex the basics of wilderness survival and plant identification. Sarah, a local veterinarian, had instilled in him a profound respect for animals. Together, they'd nurtured Alex's unique bond with the natural world. On a crisp autumn afternoon, just as the leaves were beginning to turn vibrant shades of red and gold, Alex set out on one of his regular forest excursions. He packed his trusty backpack with a few essentials, a water bottle, some trail mix, and a first aid kit his mom insisted he always carry. As he stepped into the woods, the familiar scent of pine and damp earth welcomed him. The forest was alive with activity. Squirrels chattered overhead, busy storing acorns for the coming winter. A woodpecker's rhythmic tapping echoed through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a brook babbled cheerfully. Alex moved through this symphony of nature with ease, his feet finding familiar paths worn smooth by countless adventures. As he ventured deeper into the forest, Alex found himself in a part of the woods he'd never explored before. The trees here were older, their trunks wider and gnarled with age. Moss hung from branches like green beards, and the underbrush was thicker, making it harder to navigate. But Alex wasn't deterred. If anything, the unfamiliarity of this section of the forest only heightened his excitement. It was then that he heard it, a faint whimper that seemed out of place among the usual forest sounds. Alex paused, his head tilted to one side as he tried to pinpoint the source of the noise. There it was again, a pitiful cry that tugged at his heartstrings. Without hesitation, he moved towards the sound, pushing through dense undergrowth. In a small clearing, partially hidden by a fallen log, Alex found the source of the cries. A wolf pup, no more than a few months old, was trapped in a cruel metal snare. The sight made Alex's blood run cold. Trapping was illegal in this part of the forest, and the thought of someone deliberately hurting an animal filled him with a mixture of anger and sadness. The pup's leg was caught in the snare, and it whimpered pitifully as it tried to free itself. Its grey fur was matted with dirt and leaves, and its golden eyes were wide with fear and pain. As Alex approached, the pup growled weakly, baring tiny teeth in a futile attempt at defense. "It's okay, little guy," Alex said softly, his voice calm and reassuring. "I'm not gonna hurt you. I want to help." He knelt beside the trapped pup, speaking in low, soothing tones as he assessed the situation. The snare was tight around the pup's leg, but thankfully, it didn't appear to have cut into the skin. Alex knew he had to act quickly to free the animal before any serious damage was done. Carefully, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a multi-tool his dad had given him for his last birthday. With steady hands, he began working on the snare, all the while keeping up a steady stream of calming words to the frightened pup. "You're being so brave," he murmured. "Just a little bit longer, and you'll be free." It took several tense minutes, but finally, Alex managed to loosen the snare enough to slip it off the pup's leg. As soon as it was free, he expected the wolf to bolt, but to his surprise, it remained where it was, looking up at him with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. Alex gently examined the pup's leg, relieved to find no serious injuries. "You're okay," he said, smiling at the little wolf. "You're gonna be just fine." As if understanding his words, the pup's tail gave a tentative wag. Alex couldn't help but chuckle at the gesture, so reminiscent of a domestic dog. He knew, of course, that this was a wild animal, but he couldn't deny the connection he felt to the small creature. "I can't just leave you here," Alex mused aloud. "You're too young to be on your own." He looked around, hoping to see signs of the pup's pack, but the forest remained quiet save for the usual ambient sounds. Making a decision, Alex carefully scooped up the wolf pup. To his surprise, it didn't resist, instead seeming to relax in his arms. "I'm gonna call you Barak," he said, the name coming to him suddenly. "It means blessed in Native American. And you sure are blessed to have gotten out of that trap." With Barak safely cradled in his arms, Alex began the journey back home. He knew his parents would be surprised, and probably a little concerned, but he was determined to help the pup. As he walked, he talked softly to Barak, telling him about Pinewood Grove and promising to take care of him until he was strong enough to return to the wild. The sun was setting by the time Alex emerged from the forest, casting long shadows across the Thompsons' backyard. Sarah was in the garden, tending to her late-season vegetables when she spotted her son approaching with his unusual bundle. "Alex," she called out, her voice a mix of confusion and concern. "What have you got there?" As Alex explained the situation, Sarah's expression softened. She may not have expected her son to bring home a wolf pup, but she understood his compassion. Together, they brought Barak into the house, where John was equally surprised but supportive of his son's decision to help the animal. Over the next few weeks, Alex and Barak became inseparable. With Sarah's veterinary expertise, they nursed the pup back to health, treating his leg and making sure he was properly nourished. Alex took on the responsibility of caring for Barak with a maturity that impressed both his parents. As Barak grew stronger, Alex spent hours with him in the backyard, playing and beginning basic training. To everyone's amazement, the wolf pup seemed to understand Alex on an almost preternatural level, responding to his commands and emotions with uncanny precision. The bond between boy and wolf deepened with each passing day. Barak's initial wariness faded, replaced by unwavering trust and loyalty. When Alex was happy, Barak's tail would wag furiously. When he was sad or frustrated, the wolf pup would nuzzle against him comfortingly. Word spread quickly through Pinewood Grove about the Thompson boy and his unusual pet. Some neighbors were wary, but most were fascinated by the unique relationship between Alex and Barak. The local kids would often gather at the edge of the Thompsons' yard, watching in awe as Alex and Barak played or trained together. As autumn gave way to winter, Alex and Barak's adventures continued. They would spend hours exploring the snowy forests, Barak's keen senses often leading them to hidden wonders, a family of deer sheltering in a thicket, or a majestic owl perched high in a bare tree. These excursions deepened Alex's already profound connection with nature. He found himself increasingly attuned to the rhythms of the forest, able to sense subtle changes in the environment that others might miss. It was as if Barak had unlocked some dormant ability within him, allowing Alex to tap into the very essence of the natural world. Little did Alex know that this extraordinary bond with Barak and his growing connection to nature were just the beginning of an incredible journey, one that would test his strength, challenge his understanding of the world, and ultimately reveal a destiny far greater than he could have ever imagined. As the winter months passed and spring began to peek through the melting snow, Alex and Barak's bond continued to strengthen, becoming the talk of Pinewood Grove. Their story of friendship and mutual understanding between human and wild animal touched the hearts of many, serving as a reminder of the deep connections possible between all living beings. As spring blossomed in Pinewood Grove, bringing with it the sweet scent of wildflowers and the cheerful songs of returning birds, an unsettling change began to take hold of Alex. At first, it was barely noticeable, a slight fatigue that his parents attributed to his active lifestyle and growth spurt. But as the days grew longer and warmer, Alex's condition worsened at an alarming rate. It started with a persistent tiredness that seemed to seep into his bones. Alex, once full of boundless energy, now struggled to keep up with Barak during their daily romps through the forest. His usual vibrant smile became strained, and dark circles appeared under his eyes, giving him a haunted look that worried his parents deeply. Sarah and John Thompson watched their son with growing concern. They had always encouraged Alex's connection with nature, believing it to be a source of strength and joy for him. Now, they couldn't help but wonder if his frequent forays into the woods had exposed him to something dangerous, a tick-borne illness, perhaps, or some other forest-dwelling pathogen. As a veterinarian, Sarah was no stranger to mysterious ailments, but seeing her son's health deteriorate so rapidly filled her with a fear she'd never experienced before. She insisted on taking Alex to Dr. Martinez, the town's respected family physician, for a thorough examination. Dr. Martinez's office was a familiar place to Alex, filled with the antiseptic smell common to all medical facilities and decorated with faded posters promoting healthy living. But on this visit, the friendly atmosphere felt oppressive. As the doctor examined him, Alex could sense the growing worry in both the physician and his mother. "I just don't understand it," Dr. Martinez said, frowning as he reviewed Alex's test results. "His symptoms don't align with any common illness I'm familiar with. We'll need to run more tests, maybe consult with specialists in Lexington." The news hit the Thompson family hard. John took time off from his ranger duties to be with his son, while Sarah divided her time between her veterinary practice and researching possible causes for Alex's condition. They tried everything, from conventional medicine to herbal remedies suggested by well-meaning neighbors. Nothing seemed to help. Through it all, Barak remained a constant presence at Alex's side. The wolf, now nearly full-grown, seemed to sense the gravity of the situation. He rarely left Alex's room, maintaining a protective vigil over his human friend. When Alex's strength failed him, Barak was there, offering silent comfort and unwavering companionship. As weeks turned into months, Alex's condition continued to deteriorate. His once robust frame became thin and frail, his skin taking on a sickly pallor that no amount of summer sun could warm. The vibrant boy who once roamed the forests with boundless enthusiasm now struggled to walk from his bed to the bathroom without assistance. The impact of Alex's illness rippled through the tight-knit community of Pinewood Grove. Neighbors rallied around the Thompson family, bringing home-cooked meals, offering to run errands, and providing emotional support. The local church organized prayer circles, and even those who had been wary of Barak's presence in town found themselves hoping for a miracle for the boy who had shown such kindness to a wild animal. Alex's classmates, missing their friend's presence at school, organized a get-well card campaign. His room soon filled with colorful, handmade cards bearing messages of hope and encouragement. These gestures of support touched Alex deeply, providing moments of light in the increasingly dark days of his illness. Despite the outpouring of community support, a sense of helplessness pervaded the Thompson household. John and Sarah felt as though they were watching their son slip away, powerless to stop it. They argued over treatment options, their frustration and fear manifesting as sharp words exchanged in hushed tones when they thought Alex couldn't hear. One particularly difficult evening, as Alex lay in bed with Barak curled up beside him, he overheard his parents' whispered conversation in the hallway. "We need to consider taking him to the research hospital in Cincinnati," John said, his voice strained with worry. "They might have resources we don't have here." Sarah's reply was choked with tears. "But what if the journey is too much for him? He's so weak, John. I'm scared we'll lose him if we push too hard." The weight of his parents' fear and sadness pressed down on Alex, making it hard to breathe. He buried his face in Barak's fur, drawing comfort from the wolf's steady presence. In that moment, he made a silent promise to fight, to find a way through this mysterious illness, if not for himself, then for his family and the community that had shown him so much love. As Alex's condition worsened, strange occurrences began to manifest around him. Plants in his room seemed to grow at an accelerated rate, reaching toward him as if drawn by an unseen force. Birds would gather on the tree outside his window, their songs taking on an almost mournful quality. And on nights when the pain was at its worst, Alex could have sworn he saw faint, shimmering lights dancing at the edges of his vision. These inexplicable phenomena did not go unnoticed by the townspeople. Whispers began to circulate about the true nature of Alex's illness. Some speculated about curses or supernatural forces, while others dismissed such notions as superstitious nonsense. The divide between these viewpoints created a tension in Pinewood Grove, adding another layer of stress to the already difficult situation. It was Mrs. Oleander, the elderly widow who lived down the street, who first suggested consulting Zofia Novak. Zofia was a reclusive woman who lived on the outskirts of town, known for her extensive knowledge of herbal remedies and old folk traditions. Some called her a witch, others a wise woman, but all agreed that she possessed knowledge that went beyond conventional understanding. At first, Sarah and John were hesitant. They had put their faith in modern medicine, and the idea of turning to what many considered superstition felt like admitting defeat. But as Alex's condition continued to decline, with no answers in sight, they found themselves willing to try anything that might offer a glimmer of hope. On a misty morning in late summer, Sarah made the drive to Zophia's small cabin at the edge of the forest. The old woman was waiting on her porch as if she had been expecting the visit. Her piercing blue eyes seemed to look right through Sarah as she explained Alex's condition. Zophia listened intently, nodding occasionally, her weathered face creased with concentration. When Sarah finished speaking, the old woman was silent for a long moment, her gaze distant as if seeing something beyond the physical world. "Your son," Zophia finally said, her voice low and gravelly, "he is not sick in the way you think. His spirit is awakening to something ancient, something powerful. It is overwhelming him." Sarah's scientific mind rebelled against this explanation, but a small part of her, the part that had witnessed the strange occurrences around Alex, couldn't dismiss Zophia's words entirely. "What do you mean? How can we help him?" Zophia's eyes focused sharply on Sarah. "Bring him to me. I need to see him, to understand the extent of what's happening. But be warned, the path ahead may not be what you expect. Your son is special, Mrs. Thompson. He has been chosen for something greater than you can imagine." With a mixture of hope and trepidation, Sarah agreed to bring Alex to see Zophia. As she drove back home, her mind raced with questions and doubts. Was she doing the right thing? Could this eccentric old woman really help where modern medicine had failed? And what did she mean about Alex being chosen? When Sarah returned home and relayed her conversation with Zophia to John, they argued intensely. John was skeptical, worried about putting their son's health in the hands of someone he considered a quack. But Sarah, driven by a mother's desperation and an instinct she couldn't explain, insisted they give it a chance. Their heated discussion was interrupted by a weak call from Alex's room. They rushed to his side, finding him pale and trembling, with Barak whining softly beside the bed. As they tried to comfort their son, both parents realized that they were out of options. They had to try something different, something that might explain the inexplicable changes they had witnessed. With great care, they prepared Alex for the journey to Zophia's cabin. As they helped him into the car, Barak became agitated, clearly distressed at being separated from Alex. After a moment's hesitation, they decided to bring the wolf along, knowing that Barak's presence always seemed to have a calming effect on their son. The drive to Zophia's cabin was tense, filled with a mixture of hope and fear. As they pulled up to the small clearing where the cabin stood, they saw Zophia waiting for them, her expression grave but her eyes alight with an inner fire. "Bring him inside," she commanded, holding the door open as John carried Alex into the cabin. The interior was filled with the scent of herbs and wood smoke, shelves lined with jars of mysterious concoctions and ancient-looking books. Zophia approached Alex, her gaze intense as she studied him. She placed a gnarled hand on his forehead, closing her eyes as if listening to something only she could hear. After a long moment, she opened her eyes, a look of wonder and concern on her face. "It is as I suspected," she said softly. "Your son is a guardian of the forest, one of the rare individuals chosen by nature itself to protect and nurture the wild places of the world. His illness is not a sickness of the body, but a manifestation of his awakening powers. He is being overwhelmed by the energy of the forest, unable to control the connection that is forming." John and Sarah exchanged bewildered looks, struggling to comprehend Zophia's words. But as they watched, Alex seemed to relax for the first time in months, as if Zophia's touch and words had soothed some of the turmoil within him. Barak, who had been watching intently from the corner, approached Zophia without fear. The old woman smiled at the wolf, nodding as if confirming something. "This wolf is no ordinary animal," she said. "He is a spirit guide, drawn to your son to help him navigate his new abilities. Their bond is crucial to Alex's survival and growth." As the implications of Zophia's words began to sink in, John and Sarah realized that their son's journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. They were stepping into a world they barely understood, one where the lines between the natural and the supernatural blurred. Zophia's next words confirmed their thoughts. "I can help guide Alex, teach him to control and understand his gifts. But it will not be easy. The path of a guardian is fraught with challenges and dangers. Are you prepared to support him on this journey?" John and Sarah looked at each other, then at their son, who lay on Zophia's worn couch with Barak at his feet. Despite the fear and uncertainty they felt, they knew they had no choice. This was their son, and they would do whatever it took to help him. "We are," they said in unison, their voices firm with resolve. Zofia nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Then let us begin. The forest has chosen your son, and now we must teach him to embrace his destiny." As the sun began to set outside Zofia's cabin, casting long shadows through the windows, the Thompsons found themselves at the beginning of a journey they could never have imagined. Their lives, and the fate of the forest itself, were about to change forever. The days following their visit to Zofia's cabin were a whirlwind of activity for the Thompson family. Armed with a new understanding of Alex's condition, they found themselves navigating a world that seemed to exist just beyond the edge of ordinary reality. Zofia's words about Alex being a guardian of the forest echoed in their minds, a concept both thrilling and terrifying in its implications. Zofia wasted no time in beginning Alex's training. Her methods were unconventional, to say the least. Instead of the medicines and treatments they had become accustomed to, Alex's days were now filled with meditation exercises, lessons in identifying plants and their properties, and long talks about the interconnectedness of all living things. At first, John and Sarah were skeptical. John, in particular, struggled with the idea that his son's illness could be cured by what seemed like nothing more than old wives' tales and forest lore. But as the days passed, they couldn't deny the changes they were seeing in Alex. Color returned to his cheeks, and the dark circles under his eyes began to fade. He was still weak, but there was a new light in his eyes, a spark of vitality that had been missing for so long. "It's like he's waking up," Sarah remarked one evening as she and John watched Alex sitting in the backyard with Barak, his hands buried in the wolf's thick fur. "Not just from the illness, but to something more." John nodded, his expression a mixture of relief and lingering concern. "I still don't understand half of what Zofia talks about, but I can't argue with the results. Our boy is coming back to us." As Alex grew stronger, Zofia introduced a new element to his training. She enlisted the help of Mikhail Kowalski, a friend of hers who lived in the next town over. Mikhail was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a shaggy beard and eyes that seemed to twinkle with hidden knowledge. He introduced himself as a shaman, a term that would have once made John and Sarah roll their eyes. Now, they greeted him with cautious hope. Mikhail's arrival marked a turning point in Alex's journey. Where Zofia's teachings had been gentle and nurturing, Mikhail's were intense and challenging. He pushed Alex to explore the limits of his newfound abilities, teaching him to sense the energy flowing through the forest and even, on rare occasions, to influence it. "The forest is alive," Mikhail would say, his voice deep and resonant as he led Alex through the woods. "Not just in the way that all living things are alive, but as a single, conscious entity. As a guardian, you are both a part of it and apart from it. You must learn to walk the line between these two states." These lessons were not easy. Often, Alex would return home exhausted, his body aching and his mind reeling from the effort of trying to perceive the world in this new way. But with each passing day, his strength grew, and with it, his confidence in his abilities. Barak remained a constant presence throughout Alex's training. The wolf seemed to understand intuitively what Alex was going through, often guiding him to specific places in the forest or alerting him to subtle changes in the environment that he might otherwise have missed. Mikhail watched this interaction with knowing eyes. "Your wolf is more than just a companion," he explained to Alex one day as they rested by a bubbling stream. "He is a spirit guide, a bridge between your world and the world of the forest. Learn to trust his instincts as much as your own." As Alex's training progressed, strange things began to happen in and around Pinewood Grove. Flowers bloomed out of season, trees that had been ailing for years suddenly flourished, and wild animals were spotted in unusual places, behaving in ways that defied explanation. The townsfolk, already unsettled by Alex's mysterious illness and equally mysterious recovery, began to whisper. Some spoke of miracles, while others muttered darkly about curses and dark magic. The divide that had begun to form during Alex's illness deepened, creating a tension that hung over the town like a storm cloud. Sarah and John found themselves caught in the middle of this growing controversy. They struggled to explain Alex's condition and recovery without revealing the full truth, aware that most people would have a hard time accepting the reality of what their son was becoming. It was during this time of uncertainty that Zofia suggested a bold step in Alex's training. "He needs to undergo a spirit journey," she told John and Sarah one evening as they sat around the Thompsons' kitchen table. "It's a ritual that will help him fully awaken his abilities and truly understand his role as a guardian." The idea of a spirit journey filled John and Sarah with apprehension. It sounded dangerous, possibly even life-threatening. But Zofia assured them that both she and Mikhail would be there to guide Alex through the process. "It's not without risk," Mikhail admitted, his expression serious. "But it's necessary. Alex's powers are growing faster than he can control them. Without this ritual, he could become a danger to himself and others." After much discussion and soul-searching, John and Sarah agreed to allow the ritual. They knew they were placing their son's life in Zofia and Mikhail's hands, but they also recognized that they had stepped into a world where their usual parental protections were no longer sufficient. The night of the ritual arrived on the eve of the autumn equinox. Zofia had chosen a small clearing deep in the forest, a place where she said the veil between worlds was thin. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, they made their way through the woods. Alex walked between his parents, Barak padding silently beside him. Despite the gravity of the situation, there was a sense of rightness to the moment, as if all of nature was holding its breath in anticipation. In the clearing, Mikhail had prepared a ceremonial space. A circle of stones surrounded a small fire pit, and various herbs and crystals were arranged in intricate patterns on the ground. The air was thick with the scent of sage and cedar. "Are you ready?" Zofia asked Alex, her eyes searching his face. Alex took a deep breath, looking first at his parents, then at Barak, before nodding. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady despite the fear and excitement churning in his stomach. The ritual began as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky. Mikhail led Alex to the center of the stone circle, instructing him to sit cross-legged before the unlit fire pit. Zofia began to chant in a language none of the Thompsons recognized, her voice rising and falling in a hypnotic rhythm. As the chant continued, Mikhail lit the fire. The flames leapt up with unnatural speed, casting flickering shadows across the clearing. Alex felt a wave of dizziness wash over him, and the world around him began to blur. "Remember," Mikhail's voice seemed to come from very far away, "trust in yourself, in your connection to the forest, and in Barak. Let them guide you." Alex closed his eyes, focusing on his breathing as Zofia had taught him. He could feel Barak's presence beside him, a steady anchor in the swirling chaos of sensation that was overtaking him. Gradually, the sounds of the forest faded away, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through his entire being. When Alex opened his eyes again, he found himself in a place that was both familiar and utterly alien. The trees around him were impossibly tall, their branches weaving together to form a living canopy overhead. The ground beneath his feet pulsed with energy, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with countless motes of light. Barak stood beside him, but the wolf was transformed. His fur gleamed with an inner light, and his eyes held a wisdom that went beyond anything Alex had seen before. Without a word, Barak began to walk, and Alex followed. Their journey through this spirit realm was a series of vivid, dreamlike encounters. Alex saw the forest as a vast, interconnected web of life, each plant and animal a vital thread in an unimaginably complex tapestry. He felt the slow, patient thoughts of ancient trees and the quick, darting consciousness of birds and insects. At times, the visions were overwhelming. Alex witnessed the forest's memories of wildfires and storms, of droughts and floods. He felt the pain of trees being cut down and the joy of new growth in spring. Through it all, Barak remained by his side, a comforting presence in the face of these intense experiences. As the journey progressed, Alex began to understand the true nature of his role as a guardian. He saw how the forest's energy flowed through him, how his actions and decisions could influence the health and balance of the entire ecosystem. It was a responsibility that filled him with both awe and humility. The final vision came as a surprise. Alex found himself face to face with a being of pure light, a manifestation of the forest's collective consciousness. It communicated not in words, but in feelings and images, impressing upon Alex the importance of his role and the challenges that lay ahead. As the vision faded, Alex felt himself being pulled back to the physical world. He opened his eyes to find himself still sitting in the stone circle, the fire before him now reduced to glowing embers. Zofia and Mikhail knelt on either side of him, their faces etched with concern and wonder. "Welcome back, young guardian," Zofia said softly, helping Alex to his feet. "How do you feel?" Alex took a moment to assess himself. The weakness and fatigue that had plagued him for so long were gone, replaced by a sense of vitality and purpose that he had never experienced before. He could feel the forest around him, alive and aware, in a way that was both exhilarating and slightly overwhelming. "I feel different," he said finally, looking from Zofia to Mikhail, then to his parents who stood just outside the circle, their faces a mixture of relief and amazement. "I understand now. I know what I have to do." As dawn broke over the forest, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, the small group made their way back to Pinewood Grove. Alex walked with a new confidence, Barak at his side. The bond between them had deepened, transcending the relationship between boy and wolf to become something far more profound. John and Sarah watched their son with a mixture of pride and trepidation. They knew that life would never be the same, that the path ahead would be filled with challenges they could scarcely imagine. But they also saw the strength and determination in Alex's eyes, and they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. As they emerged from the forest, the first rays of sunlight touched the trees of Pinewood Grove. In that moment, it seemed to Alex that he could see the threads of energy connecting everything: the trees, the buildings, the people just beginning to stir in their homes. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his new role settling on his shoulders. The journey of the forest's young guardian had truly begun. The weeks following Alex's spirit journey were a time of profound change, not just for him, but for the entire town of Pinewood Grove. As autumn deepened, painting the forest in vibrant shades of red and gold, Alex found himself navigating a world that seemed both familiar and startlingly new. His recovery, once a source of whispered speculation among the townspeople, now became impossible to ignore. The frail, sickly boy was gone, replaced by a young man who radiated health and a quiet confidence that drew curious glances wherever he went. Alex's transformation was most evident in his eyes. They now held a depth and wisdom that seemed far beyond his years. Barak, too, had changed. The wolf moved with a new purpose, his presence at Alex's side no longer a source of unease for the townspeople, but a subject of wonder. Children would point and whisper excitedly when they saw the pair walking down Main Street, and even adults found themselves pausing to watch them pass. For Alex, each day brought new discoveries as he explored the extent of his newfound abilities. Under Zofia and Mikhail's continued guidance, he learned to attune himself to the rhythms of the forest, to sense disturbances in its energy, and even to communicate, in a limited way, with the plants and animals around him. "Remember," Mikhail would say during their lessons, his voice gruff but kind, "your gift is not about control, but about harmony. You are a conduit for the forest's energy, not its master." These lessons often took place deep in the woods, where Alex could practice without fear of being observed. He learned to coax seeds into sprouting with just a touch, to calm agitated animals with a whispered word, and to sense approaching changes in the weather by the shifting patterns of energy in the air. But it wasn't all ethereal energy work and communing with nature. Zofia insisted that Alex also learn the practical skills of a forest guardian. She taught him about medicinal herbs, showing him how to identify, harvest, and prepare them. Under her tutelage, he learned to track animals, to navigate by the stars, and to find water in unlikely places. A guardian must be as much a part of the physical world as the spiritual one, she would remind him. Your body is the vessel for your gift. You must keep it strong and capable. As Alex grew into his role, the effects of his presence began to ripple through Pinewood Grove and the surrounding forest. The woods seemed more vibrant than ever before, with plants growing in abundance and animals thriving. People reported feeling inexplicably uplifted when walking through the forest, as if the trees themselves were emanating a sense of peace and well-being. But not everyone viewed these changes as positive. Some of the more conservative members of the community, led by the town's mayor, Harold Simmons, began to voice concerns about the strange occurrences. They spoke of unnatural forces and the dangers of meddling with things beyond human understanding. "This isn't right," Mayor Simmons declared at a town meeting, his face flushed with emotion. "Trees don't just grow overnight. Animals don't suddenly start acting tame. Something's going on in those woods, and I think we all know it has something to do with the Thompson boy and that wolf of his." The meeting erupted into heated debate, with the town divided between those who saw the changes as a blessing and those who viewed them with suspicion and fear. John and Sarah Thompson found themselves caught in the middle, struggling to protect their son while also maintaining the secrecy that Zofia and Mikhail had impressed upon them. "People fear what they don't understand," Zofia told them one evening, her aged face creased with concern. "And what Alex represents is beyond most people's comprehension. We must tread carefully." As tensions in the town grew, Alex faced his own internal struggles. The weight of his responsibilities as a guardian often felt overwhelming. There were nights when he would wake in a cold sweat, haunted by visions of the forest in pain, crying out for help against threats he couldn't yet understand. It was during one of these difficult nights that Alex made a decision. Unable to sleep, he slipped out of the house with Barak by his side. They made their way to the heart of the forest, to the clearing where Alex had undergone his spirit journey. The night was clear, the full moon bathing the forest in silver light. Alex sat cross-legged in the center of the stone circle, Barak a warm presence at his back. Closing his eyes, he reached out with his senses, feeling the pulse of life all around him. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this," he whispered, his words carried away by the gentle night breeze. "How can I protect all of this? How can I make people understand?" As if in response to his doubts, Alex felt a surge of energy from the earth beneath him. It flowed through him, warm and reassuring, filling him with a sense of connection to something vast and ancient. In that moment, he understood that he was not alone in his task. The forest itself was his ally, lending him strength and wisdom. Opening his eyes, Alex gasped in wonder. The clearing was alive with soft, glowing lights, not the harsh glare of anything man-made, but the gentle bioluminescence of countless fireflies. They swirled around him in complex patterns, as if dancing to music only they could hear. Barak let out a soft whine, nudging Alex's hand with his nose. As Alex buried his fingers in the wolf's fur, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. He realized that this connection, this harmony with nature, was what he needed to share with the people of Pinewood Grove. With newfound determination, Alex stood, the fireflies swirling around him like a living cloak of light. "I am a guardian of the forest," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "And I will find a way to bridge the gap between my world and theirs." As if in response to his declaration, a warm breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the scents of pine and wild herbs. Alex felt a profound sense of rightness, of being exactly where he was meant to be. The journey back home was filled with a quiet excitement. Ideas were forming in Alex's mind, ways to help the townspeople understand and appreciate the forest as he did. He would start small, he decided. Maybe offer to take some of his classmates on nature walks, or work with his dad to organize community events in the woods. As dawn broke over Pinewood Grove, Alex and Barak slipped back into the house, unnoticed. But something had changed. There was a new sense of purpose in Alex's steps, a clarity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Sarah, always attuned to her son's moods, noticed the change at breakfast. "You seem different this morning," she said, studying his face. "Did something happen?" Alex smiled, a hint of his old mischievous self shining through. "Just had some time to think," he said. "Mom, I've got some ideas I want to talk to you and Dad about. I think I know how we can help people understand what's happening in the forest." John looked up from his coffee, exchanging a glance with Sarah. They had been worried about the growing tensions in town, unsure how to protect their son from the fear and suspicion being directed his way. But seeing the determination in Alex's eyes, they felt a glimmer of hope. "We're all ears, son," John said, setting down his mug. "What did you have in mind?" As Alex began to outline his plans, the morning sunlight streamed through the window, catching the highlights in his hair. For a moment, it seemed to his parents that he was surrounded by the same soft glow they had seen in the forest during his spirit journey. In that instant, they saw him not just as their son, But as the guardian he had become a bridge between two worlds, carrying the hope for a future where humans and nature could exist in true harmony. The challenges ahead were many, and the path uncertain. But as the Thompson family sat around their kitchen table, talking animatedly about Alex's ideas, there was a sense of optimism in the air. Change was coming to Pinewood Grove, and with it, the possibility of a new understanding between the town and the forest it had always lived alongside but never truly known. As they talked, Barak lay at Alex's feet, his eyes alert and intelligent. Outside, a chickadee landed on the windowsill, tilting its head as if listening to the conversation within. And deep in the forest, the ancient trees stirred in a breeze that carried the first whispers of a new era, one in which the guardians of the forest would once again walk openly among mankind. As summer gave way to fall in Pinewood Grove, Alex Thompson found himself at the center of a quiet revolution. The ideas he had shared with his parents that hopeful morning had blossomed into a series of community initiatives that were slowly but surely changing the way the townspeople viewed their relationship with the surrounding forest. It began with small steps. Alex, with the support of his parents and the guidance of Zofia and Mikal, started organizing weekend nature walks for his classmates and their families. These weren't ordinary hikes, they were journeys of discovery, where Alex shared his deep knowledge of the forest ecosystem in a way that was both accessible and captivating. "See this mushroom?" Alex would say, crouching down to point out a cluster of orange fungi at the base of an old oak. "It's called chicken of the woods. It's not only edible but really tasty when cooked right. But more importantly, it plays a crucial role in breaking down dead wood and recycling nutrients back into the forest." His enthusiasm was infectious. Kids who had once been more interested in video games than vegetation found themselves eagerly identifying plants and tracking animal signs. Parents, initially skeptical, were amazed at the wealth of knowledge their children were acquiring. John Thompson, seeing the positive impact of these walks, worked with the local parks department to develop a series of educational programs. Soon, there were workshops on sustainable foraging, classes on wilderness first aid, and seminars on the importance of forest conservation. Sarah, meanwhile, used her veterinary expertise to set up a wildlife rehabilitation center on the outskirts of town. It quickly became a popular attraction, allowing townspeople to see up close the animals that called their forest home and learn about the challenges they faced. Throughout it all, Barak remained a constant presence at Alex's side. The wolf's gentle demeanor around children and his apparent understanding of Alex's instructions helped ease many people's fears about wild animals. It wasn't uncommon to see a group of wide-eyed kids listening intently as Alex explained wolf behavior, with Barak sitting calmly nearby as a living example. As the weeks passed, a change began to sweep through Pinewood Grove. People who had once viewed the forest with indifference or even fear now spoke of it with respect and wonder. Gardens around town started featuring native plants, and there was a growing interest in organic, sustainable living practices. But not everyone was won over. Mayor Simmons and a group of like-minded individuals continued to view the changes with suspicion. They argued that Alex's influence was unnatural, that his connection to the forest was dangerous and unpredictable. "What happens when he can't control it anymore?" Simmons would ask at town meetings, his voice filled with barely contained fear. "What happens when the wild things he's encouraging decide to come into our town?" These concerns came to a head one crisp October morning when a black bear was spotted on the edge of town. Panic spread quickly, with worried parents keeping their children indoors and calls for the animal to be trapped or even shot. Alex, hearing the commotion, rushed to the scene with Barak. He found a crowd gathered at a safe distance, watching as the bear rummaged through a knocked-over trash can. Police officers stood by, looking uncertain about how to proceed. "Please," Alex said, approaching the officers. "Let me try to handle this." The officers, having heard about Alex's way with animals, exchanged glances before reluctantly agreeing. The crowd watched in tense silence as Alex slowly approached the bear, Barak at his heel. Alex reached out with his senses, feeling the bear's confusion and fear. It was a young male, likely recently separated from its mother and struggling to find its way in the world. Keeping his movements slow and deliberate, Alex began to speak in a low, soothing voice. "Hey there, big guy," he said softly. "I know you're scared and hungry, "But this isn't a safe place for you." To the amazement of the onlookers, the bear stopped its foraging and turned to look at Alex. There was a moment of stillness, a silent communication passing between boy and beast. Then, slowly, the bear turned and ambled back towards the forest, pausing only once to look back at Alex before disappearing into the trees. A cheer went up from the crowd. In that moment, even the most skeptical could not deny that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Alex had faced down a potentially dangerous situation with calm and compassion, embodying the harmony between humans and nature that he had been trying to teach. In the days that followed, the bear incident became the talk of the town. It served as a tipping point, swaying many who had been on the fence about Alex's efforts. Even Mayor Simmons, while still cautious, had to admit that Alex's intervention had potentially averted a tragedy. This event marked a new phase in Alex's role as guardian. He was no longer just teaching people about the forest, he was actively protecting both the town and the wildlife, serving as a bridge between two worlds that had long been separate. With this new level of acceptance came greater responsibility. Alex found himself called upon to mediate all sorts of human-wildlife conflicts, from raccoons in attics to deer in gardens. Each situation was an opportunity to educate, to foster understanding, and to find solutions that respected both human needs and wildlife welfare. Zofia and Mikhail watched these developments with pride and a touch of concern. They knew that Alex's growing public role put him at risk of exposure. The more people witnessed his abilities, the harder it would be to keep the full extent of his nature a secret. "You must be careful, young guardian," Zofia warned during one of their lessons. "There are those in the wider world who would seek to exploit your gifts, or worse, fear them enough to want to destroy them." Alex nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I know," he said. "But I can't stand by and do nothing when I can help. This is what being a guardian means, isn't it? To protect and nurture, even when it's difficult." Mikhail smiled, clapping a hand on Alex's shoulder. "You're learning, my boy. The path of a guardian is never easy, but it is always worthwhile." As autumn deepened, bringing with it vibrant colors and crisp air, Alex continued to grow into his role. His connection to the forest strengthened, allowing him to sense changes and disturbances over a wider area. He could feel the ebb and flow of seasons more acutely, understanding on a profound level the cyclical nature of life and death in the ecosystem. This deeper connection brought with it new challenges. Alex began to have vivid dreams of distant forests, of ancient trees groaning under the weight of years, of animals fleeing from unseen threats. He realized that his guardianship extended beyond just the woods around Pinewood Grove. He was tapping into a global network of forest consciousness. Barak, ever attuned to Alex's moods, provided comfort during these nights of restless sleep. The wolf's presence was a grounding force, reminding Alex of the tangible, immediate world around him when the vastness of his connection threatened to overwhelm him. One particularly memorable dream jolted Alex awake in the middle of the night. He had seen a vision of a far-off forest burning, the trees screaming in silent agony as flames consumed them. The pain and fear had felt so real that for a moment, he could smell smoke in his room. Shaken, Alex slipped out of bed and went to his window. The forest behind his house was peaceful under the moonlight, but he could feel a tension in the air, a sense of anticipation. Something was changing in the world, and he knew instinctively that he would have a role to play in whatever was to come. As he stood there, Barak padded silently to his side. Alex buried his hand in the wolf's fur, drawing comfort from the contact. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us, buddy," he murmured. Barak looked up at him, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. In that gaze, Alex saw understanding, loyalty, and a readiness to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were partners in this journey, guardians of the forest and protectors of the delicate balance between human and natural worlds. As dawn began to lighten the sky, Alex made a decision. It was time to expand his efforts beyond Pinewood Grove. The world was changing, and it needed more people who understood the importance of living in harmony with nature. He would continue his work in the town, but he would also reach out to other communities, sharing his knowledge and inspiring others to connect with the natural world around them. With this resolution, Alex felt a sense of purpose settling over him like a mantle. He was no longer just a boy with an unusual gift, He was a guardian of the forest, a steward of the earth, and a bridge between worlds. The path ahead would be challenging, but as he stood there with Barak by his side and the awakening forest before him, Alex Thompson knew he was ready to embrace his destiny fully. As the first rays of sunlight touched the treetops, turning the leaves to gold, Alex smiled. A new day was dawning, not just for him, but for the forest and for all those who would learn to hear its voice. The journey of the young guardian was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. Years passed, and the legend of Alex Thompson, the guardian of Pinewood Grove, grew far beyond the borders of the small town nestled in the Appalachian forests. What had begun as a local phenomenon had blossomed into a movement that touched lives across the country and even around the world. Now in his early 20s, Alex had grown into a tall, lean young man with an quiet confidence and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of the ancient forests. His once unruly brown hair was now often tied back in a neat ponytail, though it still had a tendency to escape in wisps around his face when he was deep in the woods. Barak, his loyal wolf companion, had aged gracefully, his muzzle now flecked with grey but his golden eyes as alert and intelligent as ever. The transformation of Pinewood Grove was nothing short of remarkable. Under Alex's guidance, the town had become a model of sustainable living and environmental stewardship. The once clear divide between the town and the surrounding forest had blurred, with green corridors extending into the urban areas and wildlife-friendly practices adopted by most residents. The town's economy had shifted too. Ecotourism now brought a steady stream of visitors eager to experience the harmony between humans and nature that Pinewood Grove had achieved. Local artisans crafted goods from sustainable forest products, and a thriving farmers' market showcased organic produce grown using methods that Alex had helped develop, blending modern agriculture with ancient forest wisdom. Education had been key to this transformation. The small elementary school where Alex had once been an outsider now boasted an innovative curriculum that integrated environmental studies into every subject. It wasn't uncommon to see classes being held in the forest, with students learning math by calculating tree heights or studying literature inspired by nature. But perhaps the most significant change was in the people themselves. The fear and suspicion that had once greeted Alex's abilities had given way to respect and admiration. Children grew up knowing the names of plants and animals, understanding the delicate balance of the ecosystem, and feeling a deep connection to the natural world around them. Even Mayor Simmons, once Alex's most vocal critic, had come around. In his final year in office, he had worked with Alex to establish the Pinewood Grove Forest Trust, an organization dedicated to preserving and protecting the surrounding woodlands for future generations. As word of Pinewood Grove's transformation spread, Alex found himself increasingly in demand as a speaker and consultant. He traveled to communities across the country, sharing his knowledge and helping others find their own connection to the natural world. These trips were always bittersweet. While he was glad to spread his message, he felt the pull of his home forest keenly when he was away. It was during one of these trips that Alex had a revelation. He was speaking at a conference in Seattle, discussing the importance of urban green spaces, when a question from the audience struck him. "Mr. Thompson," a young woman asked, her voice earnest, "your work is inspiring, but how can we hope to make a difference when the environmental challenges we face are so enormous? How do we not get overwhelmed?" Alex paused, considering his words carefully. He thought of his own journey, of the times he had felt overwhelmed by the weight of his responsibilities as a guardian. Then he smiled, a warm, genuine expression that lit up his face. "We start small," he said. "We start with ourselves, with our own communities. Every action, no matter how small, ripples outward. When we connect with the natural world around us, when we learn to listen to the voice of the forest, we become part of something larger than ourselves. And that connection, that sense of being part of a greater whole, gives us the strength to face even the biggest challenges." His words resonated not just with the audience, but with Alex himself. He realized that his work in Pinewood Grove, while significant, was just the beginning. There was so much more to be done, so many more people to reach. Returning home, Alex shared his thoughts with his parents, with Zofia and Mikal, and of course, with Barak. Together, they began to formulate a plan for the next phase of their work. The result was the establishment of the Forest Guardian Academy. Using the forests around Pinewood Grove as a living classroom, the academy would train a new generation of environmental stewards. Students would learn not just about ecology and conservation, but about the deeper, spiritual connection to nature that Alex embodied. The academy quickly gained recognition, attracting students from across the country and even internationally. Alex took an active role in teaching, sharing his unique perspective and abilities. But he was careful to emphasize that while his gifts were rare, the capacity to connect with and protect nature was within everyone. As the academy grew, so did the network of forest guardians. Graduates went out into the world, starting similar programs in their own communities, creating a web of environmental stewardship that began to span the globe. But even as his influence spread, Alex never forgot his roots. He remained deeply connected to the forest of Pinewood Grove, spending long hours walking its paths with Barak at his side. It was during one of these walks, on a warm summer evening, that he had an encounter that reminded him of how far he'd come. As he and Barak crested a familiar hill, they came across a young bear cub, similar to the one Alex had guided out of town all those years ago. The cub was alone, seemingly lost. Without hesitation, Alex reached out with his senses, connecting with the young animal. He felt the cub's fear and confusion, but also its inherent connection to the forest. Gently, through a combination of soft words and the subtle use of his abilities, Alex calmed the cub and guided it back towards its mother's territory. As he watched the cub amble away, Alex felt a profound sense of continuity. He remembered the boy he had been, frightened and unsure of his place in the world. Now, he was helping others find their way, just as Zofia, Mikal, and the forest itself had once helped him. That night, as he sat on the porch of his childhood home with his parents, Alex felt a deep sense of gratitude. John and Sarah Thompson had stood by him through every step of his journey, their love and support unwavering even when they didn't fully understand what was happening to their son. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," Alex told them, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah reached out to squeeze his hand. "You've done so much, Alex. We're so proud of you." John nodded in agreement. "You've changed this town, son. Heck, you're changing the world. But you know what makes us proudest? You're still the same caring, compassionate boy you've always been." As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Alex looked out over the town and the forest beyond. He could feel the pulse of life in the trees, the whisper of the wind through the leaves, the steady rhythms of the animals preparing for night. And intertwined with all of it, he felt the presence of the humans, his family, his friends, his students, all now part of this great web of life. In that moment, Alex understood that this was his true legacy. Not just the academy, or the transformation of Pinewood Grove, but this growing awareness, this deepening connection between humans and nature. It was a legacy of harmony, a testament to the possibility of a world where humans lived as part of nature, not apart from it. As night fell and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, Alex felt a sense of peace settle over him. The path of a guardian was not always easy, but it was always worthwhile. And as he sat there, with his parents beside him and Barak at his feet, Alex Thompson knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The story of the boy who could talk to forests had become legend, inspiring countless others to find their own connection to the natural world. But for Alex, it was simply his life, a life dedicated to nurturing the delicate balance between humanity and nature, to fostering understanding and respect for the incredible, interconnected web of life that surrounded them all. As a cool breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the scents of pine and wildflowers, Alex smiled. The journey that had begun with a young boy and a wolf in the forests of Pinewood Grove had grown into something far greater than he could have ever imagined. And yet, in many ways, it was only just beginning. For as long as there were forests to protect and people to teach, the work of the Guardian would continue. And Alex Thompson, with Barak by his side and the wisdom of the forest in his heart, was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.